Oh, Comic Sans. Oh, Jesus. Thanks, Brady. Um, so this talk starts with Tom Selleck and ends with the universe. So let's see where this goes. Hi, my name is Shah. I'd like to talk to you tonight about fractals. And not like fractals in kind of the mathematical sense. I'm kind of interested in fractals more in the sense of just the repeated patterns that kind of traverse scale. Because, you know, fractals are everywhere, right? They're in nature, they're all over the place. You can start to see fractals in the patterns of clouds, right? You can start to see fractals appearing so often in math. You can see them out in just like the other kind of systematic things that appear too. You can see the Voronoi diagram, a kind of simple algorithm that appears in dragonfly wings, in soap bubbles, in the cells of leaves. And you know, it just keeps going, right? It's all over the place. And if you look at maps as much as I do, you know, when you're panning around in Iceland looking at glaciers, you start to think about, you know, the patterns of the paintings of J. DeFeo. And if you look at maps even more and you start to dive deeper into this, you start to actually see through scale. You start to see the peaks of mountains in Siberia start to mimic the patterns of electricity through air. And this is wild, right? This is to the point of special effects, where you can take a photo of a frying pan and it starts to evoke this idea of a planet. And you know, so much so that in the movie The Fountain, they did all this macro photography of fluids. This guy, Peter Parks, who did this, said, when you look at this stuff, you feel like you're looking at infinity. And you know, I'm kind of curious, you know, what if we're not looking at infinity, not looking at nature, not looking at phenomena, but looking at ourselves, the cities that we build, the kind of infrastructure that we make, the world that we build up around us. And you know, if I were to kind of like crop this image a little differently, I could probably pass this off as a visualization of London. But it's mold. This is mold on a wall. And if you look at, and mold is crazy, right? Because if you start putting oat flakes down in the spots of cities in Japan, the mold will grow to kind of mimic the rail system of Tokyo without planning, without consciousness, right? And that's crazy to me. And that kind of reminds me of this essay by Bill McKibben called The Apartment. It was written in 1986. And in The Apartment, he kind of travels all over the world, right? And he's trying to look at the infrastructure that powers his New York apartment. He goes to oil fields, he goes to, you know, hydroelectric dams, and he starts to realize that the language that we use to describe scale stops working, it falls apart. He talks about, you know, eating a big lunch next to a big dam, and kind of repeats this all throughout the essay of all this stuff that he can't really understand. And the word big loses meaning, right? What does it mean to be big? And this experience kind of changed him, and he's now, you know, a very prominent environmentalist, because this experience allowed him to understand scale. It allowed him to understand kind of the impact of all the systems around us. And when we forget about scale, we make stupid mistakes, right? Like when people say, you know, I don't even consider myself wealthy, that makes sense in a relative sense, but it doesn't make sense absolutely. And you can actually kind of like fight understandings of scale. Like North Carolina just passed a law where you can't measure climate change before 1900, and you can't extrapolate data other than linearly. And what this constitutes is actually like a war on scale. Like this is like a war on understanding. And so, you know, when I was out in Iceland and we were on this black sand beach, and I started looking at this image there. And I could only think of the image on the right, this image of stars. And I could just, like, instead of looking at this image and kind of letting scale disappear, I want to feel this scale. I want to start to understand the kind of the like scale of this universe and understand how really, 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 for lack of a better word, big it is. Thank you.